The massive space station Kepler floated in the darkness between stars. It was home to the Galactic Military Academy, where young beings from across the galaxy came to learn the art of war. For 300 years, the same species had dominated. The Academy, the tall, blue-skinned Altarians with their perfect discipline, the insect-like Vorthek who moved as one mind, the snake-bodied Nagans who never made mistakes. Each alien race had their place in the great military machine. Commander Zefker stood at the observation deck, his blue skin darker than usual with worry. Today was different. Today, the first humans were arriving. He had read the reports about Earth dozens of times. The planet was classified as a death world, a place so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing. The weather could freeze or burn you to death. The animals hunted and killed for food. Even the plants were poisonous. Earthquakes split the ground open. Storms with winds that could tear buildings apart happened regularly. Volcanoes spewed deadly gas and fire. The oceans had creatures that could swallow ships whole. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived on this nightmare world, but had built a civilization advanced enough to reach the stars. Zefker did not understand how this was possible. The human transport ship looked different from other vessels. It was built thick and heavy, designed to take damage and keep flying. As it docked with the station, Zefker could see scratches and dents on its hull. These were not battle scars, but marks from flying through asteroid fields and solar storms that would destroy most ships. The airlock opened with a hiss of pressurized air. 4 young humans stepped onto the station. The first was Jake Morrison, a young man with brown hair and green eyes. He moved with easy confidence, looking around the station with obvious curiosity rather than fear. His uniform was standard issue, but he wore it like someone who had been in many fights before. Behind him came Lisa Parker, a woman with blonde hair tied back in a practical style. She walked with the careful steps of someone who expected the ground to give way at any moment. Her eyes constantly scanned for exits and potential threats. Tony Rodriguez followed, a stocky man with dark hair and calm brown eyes. He carried his equipment like it was an extension of his body, never fumbling or dropping anything. There was something about the way he moved that reminded Zefker of a predator. Last came Amy Sullivan, a red-haired woman who seemed to be studying everything around her. She noticed details that others missed, like the way the air circulation system worked and where the emergency controls were located. These 4 humans looked so ordinary compared to the impressive alien cadets around them. They were smaller than the Altarians, weaker than the Vorthek, and less armored than the Nagans. Yet something about them made Zefker nervous. Captain Hisheth, a Nagan instructor, slithered over to greet the newcomers. His serpentine body coiled nervously as he spoke in perfect standard galactic. "Welcome to Kepler Station," he said, his forked tongue tasting the air. "I am Captain Hisheth, your primary instructor. You will follow all regulations exactly as they are written. There will be no deviations from standard procedure." Jake Morrison smiled and nodded politely. "Thank you, sir. We're looking forward to learning from you." The response seemed normal enough, but Zefker noticed something in the human's tone. It was respectful but not submissive. There was an undertone that suggested Jake would follow orders as long as they made sense to him. The orientation began in the main assembly hall. Hundreds of alien cadets sat in perfect rows, each species grouped together. The humans were assigned seats in the front row where everyone could see them. Admiral Quexren, the station commander, began his standard welcome speech. He explained the proud traditions of the Academy, the importance of following orders without question, and the proven military doctrines that had kept peace in the galaxy for centuries. "Military success," the Admiral said, his 4 arms gesturing, "dramatically, comes from discipline, preparation, and adherence to established protocols. Every situation has a correct response. Every problem has a proper solution. Your job is to learn these responses and apply them without hesitation. The alien cadets nodded in unison, their training already showing. But Zefker noticed the humans exchanging glances. They were not disagreeing with the Admiral, but they seemed to be having a silent conversation about what they had heard. After the speech, the cadets were divided into training groups. The humans were split up, each assigned to a different squad of alien cadets. This was standard procedure, designed to prevent species from forming isolated groups. Jake Morrison found himself in Squad 7, along with 3 Altarians, 2 Vorthik, and a Nagan. The squad leader was Cadet Velther, an Altarian who had scored highest in tactical studies for his class. Their first exercise was simple, a basic combat simulation designed to test their ability to follow orders under pressure. The scenario was straightforward. Their squad was defending a supply depot from enemy attack. They had predetermined positions, established fields of fire, and clear rules of engagement. The simulation began with enemy forces approaching from the expected direction. Velther began issuing orders exactly as he had been trained. Each alien cadet moved to their assigned position and began engaging targets according to the tactical manual. Jake Morrison took his assigned position but immediately began studying the battlefield with intensity that surprised his squad mates. He was not just looking at the enemy forces. He was examining the terrain, checking sight lines, and evaluating the structural integrity of their defensive positions. "Cadet Morrison," Velther called out, "maintain your assigned firing position and engage targets as they appear in your sector." "Yes, sir," Jake replied, but he continued to scan the environment. When the enemy forces began their assault, something unexpected happened. The simulation designers had programmed a surprise element, an explosion that damaged part of the defensive wall, creating a gap in their perimeter. The alien cadets immediately called for instructions. This was not in their tactical manual. They had not been trained for this specific situation. According to proper procedure, they should wait for new orders from their instructor. Jake Morrison did not wait. He saw the gap in their defenses and the enemy forces moving to exploit it. Without asking permission, he left his assigned position and moved to cover the breach. More than that, he began using debris from the explosion to create an improvised firing position. "Cadet Morrison, return to your assigned position," Velther ordered. "Sir, if I return to my position, the enemy will break through our perimeter," Jake replied, continuing to work. "Give me 30 seconds to shore up this gap, and we can hold them." Velther was faced with a situation not covered in his training. The human was disobeying direct orders, but his tactical assessment appeared to be correct. The simulation continued around them as enemy forces pressed their attack. Jake's improvised defense held. Using nothing but rubble and damaged equipment, he created a firing position that stopped the enemy breakthrough. More importantly, he did it without waiting for approval or following any established procedure. The simulation ended with their squad successfully defending the depot. According to the scoring system, they had achieved a perfect result. But Velther was deeply troubled by what had happened. After the exercise, he approached Jake with obvious confusion. "Cadet Morrison, you disobeyed direct orders during the simulation." Jake looked genuinely puzzled. "I followed the mission objective, sir. We were ordered to defend the depot. When circumstances changed, I adapted our tactics to maintain that defense. But you did not follow proper procedure," Velther insisted. "You left your assigned position without permission. You used equipment in ways not specified in the manual. You made tactical decisions without consulting command authority." "Yes, sir," Jake agreed. The situation required immediate action. If I had waited for new orders, we would have lost the position. This was the moment when Velther realized he was dealing with something completely outside his experience. In Altarian culture, following orders was more important than achieving objectives. The idea that someone would disobey commands in order to better complete the mission was incomprehensible. Similar incidents were occurring throughout the station. Lisa Parker had turned a logistics exercise into an engineering problem, creating solutions that worked but violated established procedures. Tony Rodriguez had somehow transformed a defensive training scenario into an offensive operation. Amy Sullivan had solved the communications problem by building equipment that technically should not have functioned. The alien instructors called emergency meetings. These humans were not following the rules that had governed military training for centuries. They were improvising, adapting, and finding solutions that did not exist in any manual. More disturbing, they were achieving results that should have been impossible. Captain Hishith presented his concerns to Commander Zefker. "These humans do not think like proper soldiers," he complained. "They question orders, modify procedures, and act without authorization. They are dangerous to military discipline." But Zefker was beginning to understand something that would change everything. The humans were not failing to follow orders. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at Kepler Station. The alien instructors thought they had seen everything during those first training exercises. They were wrong. The trouble began during zero-gravity combat training aboard the simulation vessel CSS Endeavour. This was supposed to be a routine exercise that every cadet completed during their second month. The scenario was simple and had been used for decades without problems. Lieutenant Karthok floated in the command center, watching the exercise through multiple screens. He was proud of his reputation as the Academy's most demanding instructor. His Altarian heritage gave him natural advantages in three-dimensional thinking, and his rigid adherence to proper procedure had produced some of the finest officers in the fleet. Today, he was personally observing Amy Sullivan, the red-haired human who had been assigned to his advanced tactical unit. Her test scores were acceptable, but Karthok had serious doubts about her discipline. Like all humans, she had an annoying tendency to ask questions that seemed designed to challenge established methods. The exercise scenario placed a mixed squad of 8 cadets in a damaged section of a space station. They had limited oxygen, no communication with the outside, and a single objective: follow the standard rescue protocol and wait for extraction. The test measured their ability to remain calm under pressure and maintain unit cohesion until help arrived. Amy floated next to Cadet Thexmill, a Vorthek whose insect-like features twitched nervously in the artificial gravity field. The rest of their squad consisted of 2 more Altarians, a Nagan, and 2 other species Karthok barely recognized. They had been chosen specifically because they represented different ways of thinking and would need to work together despite their differences. "Begin simulation," Karthok announced through the communication system. The lights in the training module flickered and dimmed, simulating power loss. Warning alarms began sounding, and the air recycling system shut down with a mechanical groan. Red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the metal walls. Thexmill immediately began reciting the standard emergency procedures from memory. His voice had the mechanical quality that came from perfect training. Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. Establish communication with command. Conserve oxygen. Maintain current positions. Await rescue. The other alien cadets nodded and began following the established routine. They checked their equipment, confirmed their oxygen levels, and settled into positions designed to minimize energy expenditure. Everything was proceeding exactly as the training manual specified. Amy Sullivan did not follow the routine. Instead of settling into a conservation position, she began moving through the damaged section with purposeful intensity. She examined the walls, tested the integrity of damaged panels, and studied the layout of the space with an attention to detail that made Karthok uncomfortable. "Cadet Sullivan," he called through the communication system, "please follow standard protocol and remain in position." "Yes, sir," Amy replied. but she continued her examination of their surroundings. She pressed her ear against a damaged wall section and listened carefully. She sniffed the air, testing for chemical traces that might indicate hull breaches or fire damage. Most disturbing to Karthok, she began pulling apart pieces of damaged equipment to examine their internal components. "Cadet Sullivan, you are not following proper procedure," Dexmill informed her. "We should conserve energy and wait for rescue." Amy looked at the Vorthak cadet with an expression that Karthok could not read. "How long do we have?" she asked. "The simulation parameters indicate 6 hours of oxygen remaining," Dexmill replied. "Standard rescue operations require 4 hours maximum. We have adequate safety margins. What if the rescue takes longer?" Amy asked. "Rescue operations always succeed within the time parameters," Dexmill answered with confidence. "The protocols are designed to ensure this." Amy nodded but continued her examination of their environment. She was looking for something, though Karthok could not understand what. The rescue scenario was straightforward. The cadets were supposed to demonstrate their ability to remain calm and follow orders until extraction teams arrived. There was nothing else to find out. Then Amy did something that made Karthok's blood run cold. She began removing panels from the wall. "Cadet Sullivan, stop immediately," he ordered. "You are damaging Academy property." "Sir, I'm not damaging anything," Amy replied. "I'm accessing the maintenance system behind this panel." "That is not part of the exercise parameters," Karthok insisted. "I understand, sir, but I found something interesting." Before Karthok could respond, Amy had pulled a damaged panel completely free from the wall. Behind it was a maze of pipes, cables, and mechanical systems that were not supposed to be accessible. "To cadets, look at this," Amy said to her squad mates. "This section of the station has independent life support systems. If we can reroute the airflow through these maintenance tunnels, we can access emergency supplies stored in the adjacent compartments." The alien cadet stared at her in confusion. What she was describing was not part of the standard protocol. It required technical knowledge that was not included in their training, and it would mean leaving their current position to explore areas that were not part of the exercise. "Cadet Sullivan," Dexmill said carefully, "we should not deviate from established procedures. The rescue protocols exist for our safety." "I agree," Amy said. "But what if the rescue is delayed? What if the primary extraction route is blocked? What if our oxygen runs out before help arrives?" These were questions that the alien cadets had never been trained to consider. In their experience, rescue operations always succeeded. Equipment always functioned as designed. Protocols always worked because they had been tested and proven over centuries. Amy began crawling into the maintenance tunnel she had discovered. Her movements were careful but confident, like someone who had spent time in similar spaces before. She called back to her squad mates. "There's a whole network of passages back here. We could move through the entire station section if we needed to." Karthok watched in growing alarm as Amy disappeared into areas that were not part of the exercise. The simulation was designed to test discipline and patience, not exploration and improvisation. He considered ending the exercise immediately, but something stopped him. He wanted to see what the human would do next. Amy's voice came through the communication system from somewhere inside the walls. "I found the emergency supply cache. There are oxygen canisters, water recyclers, and emergency rations stored back here. Enough to keep us alive for weeks if necessary." "Cadet Sullivan, return to your position immediately," Karthok ordered. "Yes, sir," Amy replied, but her voice was moving further away. 10 minutes later, she emerged from a different wall panel on the opposite side of the compartment. She was carrying equipment that was not supposed to exist in the exercise scenario. "Sir," she reported, "I've mapped the entire maintenance system for this section. If we need to evacuate, I can get us to the primary hull in 15 minutes using these passages. I've also located 3 separate emergency supply caches and 2 independent communication systems. Karthok felt something he had never experienced before in his 30 years of military service: complete confusion about what to do next. Amy had violated every rule of the exercise, but she had also discovered capabilities that could save lives in a real emergency. That information is not relevant to this exercise, he said finally. I understand, sir, Amy replied. But it might be relevant to the next emergency. The exercise continued for another hour. The alien cadets followed standard protocol perfectly, conserving oxygen and maintaining unit discipline. Amy returned to the required position and followed orders, but Karthok could see that she was continuously analyzing their environment and developing alternative plans. When the simulated rescue team finally arrived, the exercise ended with a perfect score for protocol compliance. But Karthok knew that something fundamental had changed. Amy Sullivan had demonstrated capabilities that were not part of any training manual, and she had done it instinctively, as if exploring dangerous environments was as natural as breathing. After the exercise, Karthok called Amy to his office for a private meeting. He had reviewed her file again and found details that troubled him. She had grown up in a place called Montana, where winter temperatures could kill exposed humans in minutes. She had spent summers working in underground mines where cave-ins were a constant threat. She had learned to rock climb, whitewater raft, and survive in wilderness areas where most humans would die. Cadet Sullivan, he began, your performance today was highly irregular. Yes, sir, Amy replied. I apologize for not following proper procedure. Do you understand why we have these procedures? Karthok asked. Yes, sir. They ensure consistent results and minimize risk to personnel. Then why did you ignore them? Amy was quiet for a moment before answering. Sir, the procedures assume that everything will work as planned. On Earth, we learn that things often don't work as planned. When that happens, you need to have alternatives ready. But this was a training exercise, Karthok pointed out. The rescue was guaranteed to succeed. Dr. Veltar had been studying alien psychology for over 40 years. Her research had helped establish the basic training protocols used throughout the Galactic Alliance military. She thought she understood how different species learned, adapted, and survived under stress. The humans were proving her wrong about everything. Her office was filled with data screens showing brain scans, stress hormone measurements, and psychological profiles. For the past month, she had been conducting detailed studies of human behavior patterns during training exercises. What she was discovering challenged fundamental assumptions about survival psychology that had remained unchanged for millennia. Breakthrough came during a routine survival exercise on training, Moon Delta 7. The moon was a carefully controlled environment designed to test basic survival skills and team cooperation. The atmosphere was breathable, the temperature was comfortable, and the local plant life was harmless. Most importantly, the exercise was designed so that following standard survival protocols would guarantee success. Dr. Veltar watched from the observation bunker as 2 groups of cadets were transported to different locations on the moon's surface. The first group consisted of 12 alien cadets from various species. The second group was the 4 human cadets, along with 8 volunteers from other species who had requested to work with humans. Both groups had the same objective: survive for 72 hours using only basic equipment and whatever resources they could find on the moon. Rescue teams would extract them at the end of the exercise period. The test was designed to measure stress response, resource management, and group dynamics under mild survival conditions. The alien-only group performed exactly as Dr. Veltar expected. They established a base camp according to standard procedures, rationed their supplies carefully, and organized themselves into efficient work teams. They built regulation shelters, maintained proper sanitation, and followed all established protocols for wilderness survival. Their stress levels remained within normal parameters throughout the exercise. The human group did something completely different. Within the first hour, Jake Morrison had begun exploring the local area with an intensity that alarmed the monitoring team. He was not just looking for water and shelter locations. He was studying the soil composition, testing the structural integrity of rock formations, and examining the local plant life in ways that went far beyond basic survival needs. "Look at this," Jake called to his teammates, holding up a handful of reddish clay. "This stuff has high iron content. We could use it to make tools if we need to." Lisa Parker was examining the local plants with similar intensity. She was not just identifying which ones were safe to eat according to the provided survival manual. She was testing them for other properties that might be useful. "These fibers are really strong," she announced, pulling apart a vine-like plant. "We could weave rope from this if we needed to secure our shelter or build equipment." Dr. Veltar made notes on her observation pad. The humans were treating the survival exercise like a comprehensive resource survey. They were not just trying to survive for 72 hours. They were learning everything they could about their environment in case they needed to survive much longer. Tony Rodriguez had established their base camp, but not according to regulation procedures. Instead of building a simple shelter in the first suitable location, he had spent 2 hours studying the terrain and weather patterns before selecting a site that provided natural protection from wind, good drainage, and easy access to multiple water sources. "Why did you choose this location?" asked Cadet Zixtar, a Negan who had volunteered to work with the humans. "The regulation procedure is to establish shelter within 30 minutes of arrival." "The regulation procedure assumes rescue will come on schedule," Tony replied, continuing to work on their shelter. "What if rescue is delayed? What if we need to stay here for weeks instead of days?" Dr. Veltar felt a chill run through her reptilian body. The human was planning for contingencies that were not part of the exercise parameters. More disturbing, he was doing it automatically, as if expecting plans to fail was a normal part of his thinking process. Amy Sullivan was working on their water supply system. The exercise manual specified that each team should locate a water source and establish a collection point. Amy had done that, but she had also built a filtration system, using materials found in their environment, and created a backup collection system in case their primary source became unavailable. "Is this level of preparation necessary?" asked Cadet Morgan, an Altarian who was taking detailed notes on human behavior. "Probably not," Amy admitted. "But if something goes wrong with our main water source, we won't die of thirst while trying to find another one." Dr. Veltar realized she was witnessing something that had never been documented in survival psychology literature. The humans were not just adapting to their current situation. They were preparing for situations that might never occur, and they were doing it instinctively. On the second day of the exercise, something happened that was not part of the planned scenario. A severe storm system moved across the moon's surface, bringing high winds and torrential rain that lasted for 8 hours. The storm was natural, not part of the exercise, and it created conditions that were genuinely dangerous. The alien-only group responded to the storm by following emergency protocols. They secured their equipment, took shelter, and waited for the weather to pass. Several of their shelters were damaged by the wind, and their water collection system was contaminated by runoff, but they maintained discipline and followed proper procedures. The human group responded differently. As soon as the storm began, they activated contingency plans that Dr. Veltar had not known existed. Tony's shelter design, which had seemed unnecessarily complex, proved to be perfectly suited for severe weather. The location he had chosen provided natural wind protection, and the drainage systems he had built prevented flooding. Jake's exploration of the local Geology paid off when he guided the group to a cave system that provided additional shelter. Lisa's rope-making experiments became critical when they needed to secure equipment and create safety lines. Amy's backup water system continued to function even when their primary collection point was compromised. Most remarkably, the humans seemed to thrive during the crisis. While the alien cadets were stressed and anxious about the unexpected danger, the humans became more focused and energetic. They were not just surviving the storm. They were using it as an opportunity to test and improve their survival systems. "This is fascinating," Jake said during the height of the storm, watching water cascade off their reinforced shelter. "The wind patterns are completely different from what we expected. We should modify our ventilation system to take advantage of the airflow." Dr. Veltar stared at the monitoring screens in disbelief. The human was treating a potentially life-threatening situation as a learning opportunity. His stress hormone levels were actually decreasing as the storm intensified. The storm passed, and both groups completed the exercise successfully. But Dr. Veltar's analysis of the data revealed something that would change military psychology forever. The alien cadets had performed well under normal conditions, but had struggled when circumstances changed unexpectedly. Their stress levels had spiked during the storm, and their decision-making had become less effective when faced with situations not covered in their training. The humans showed a completely different pattern. Their stress levels remained stable throughout the exercise, and their performance actually improved when faced with unexpected challenges. They had not just adapted to changing conditions. They had prepared for them in advance, even though they had no specific reason to expect the storm. Dr. Veltar began reviewing historical data about human evolution and Earth's environment. What she found explained everything she had observed. Earth was not just a dangerous planet. It was a world where change was constant and unpredictable. Weather systems could shift from calm to deadly in minutes. Geological activity could reshape the landscape without warning. Predators, diseases, and natural disasters created constant pressure for adaptability and preparation. Most alien species had evolved on worlds that were, by human standards, remarkably stable. The Altarian homeworld had a climate that varied by only a few degrees throughout the year. The Vorthok had evolved on a planet where weather patterns were so predictable that their ancestors had built their entire civilization around seasonal cycles that had not changed in millions of years. These stable environments had produced species that excelled when conditions were predictable and controlled. They were magnificent at following complex procedures, maintaining discipline, and achieving objectives through careful planning and coordination. But they had never developed the psychological adaptations that humans considered normal. They had not learned to expect that plans would fail, equipment would break, and circumstances would change in ways that no one could predict. Dr. Veltar compiled her findings into a comprehensive report that would revolutionize military training across the galaxy. The humans, she concluded, represented a completely different approach to survival and problem-solving. Where other species had evolved to excel in stable conditions, humans had evolved to thrive in chaos. Admiral Tessara of the Altarian battle fleet had commanded warships for over 50 years. She had fought in 3 major conflicts and supervised countless training exercises. She considered herself an expert on military tactics and strategy. The reports from Kepler Station made no sense to her. According to the documentation, human cadets were somehow achieving impossible results in combat simulations. They were completing objectives that should have required twice their numbers and equipment. More disturbing, they were doing it by ignoring established tactical doctrine that had proven successful for centuries. Admiral Tessara decided to see for herself what was happening. She traveled to Kepler Station to observe the annual War Games, a massive simulation that tested everything the cadets had learned during their training. The War Games scenario was complex but familiar. two fleets would engage in a series of battles while protecting supply convoys and controlling strategic locations. The exercise had been run dozens of times with predictable results, based on force composition and tactical deployment. This year would be different. For the first time, humans would participate in senior command positions. Admiral Tisara took her position in the Command Observation Center, surrounded by screens showing the deployment of hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. The exercise would last for 3 days and cover multiple star systems. Jake Morrison had been assigned to the destroyer HMS Wellington as a junior tactical officer. His commander was Captain Dexhigh, an experienced Negan officer known for his strict adherence to proven battle strategies. Jake's role was supposed to be minimal: observe, learn, and follow orders. The Wellington was part of Battle Group 7, assigned to protect a critical supply convoy while engaging enemy forces that significantly outnumbered them. Standard doctrine called for a fighting withdrawal, accepting some losses while preserving the core fleet and ensuring the convoy reached its destination. Admiral Tisara watched as Captain Dexhigh began deploying his ships according to established defensive formations. The pattern was textbook perfect, with overlapping fields of fire and clear retreat routes that would allow damaged ships to withdraw while maintaining unit cohesion. The enemy fleet approached exactly as the simulation parameters dictated. Their formation was also standard, designed to overwhelm the defenders through superior numbers while minimizing their own casualties. The engagement should have proceeded according to established patterns, with the outcome determined by force ratios and tactical efficiency. Jake Morrison was monitoring sensor data from his position at the tactical station. Admiral Tisara watched him work with growing interest. Unlike the other bridge officers who were focused on executing their assigned roles, Jake was analyzing patterns in enemy movement that seemed to have captured his complete attention. "Captain," Jake said quietly, "I'm seeing something unusual in the enemy formation." Captain Dexhigh glanced at his tactical display without concern. "Explain." "Their lead ships are maintaining perfect spacing, but the trailing units are showing micro-deviations in their flight paths. It's very subtle, but there's a pattern to it." Admiral Tisara leaned forward in her observation seat. What was the human seeing that the other officers missed? Jake continued his analysis. "Sir, based on their formation adjustments, I believe they're planning a coordinated strike on our left flank in approximately 18 minutes. But their positioning also creates a window of vulnerability that we could exploit." Captain Dexhigh studied his displays more carefully. The enemy movements Jake described were barely detectable, well within normal operational parameters. Most commanders would consider them insignificant. "What kind of vulnerability?" the captain asked. Jake pulled up a tactical projection on his screen. "If we adjust our formation to appear weaker on the left flank while secretly reinforcing our center, we can draw their strike force into a position where they'll be separated from their main body. At that point, we could execute a coordinated counterattack that would eliminate their forward units before they could retreat." Admiral Tisara felt something she had rarely experienced in 5 decades of military service: genuine surprise. Jake Morrison was proposing a tactical maneuver that was not in any manual she knew. More importantly, he was suggesting that they abandon defensive doctrine in favor of an aggressive strategy that could either achieve complete victory or result in catastrophic defeat. Captain Dexhigh was clearly uncomfortable with the proposal. "Cadet Morrison, the current defensive formation has proven effective. Modifying our deployment based on speculation about enemy intentions would be extremely risky." "Yes, sir," Jake agreed. "But if I'm right about their attack pattern, our current formation will result in significant casualties among our escort ships. The convoy will survive, but we'll lose at least 30% of our defensive capability." The captain studied the tactical displays for several minutes while the two fleets continued their approach. Admiral Tisara could see him weighing the risks of following established doctrine against the potential advantages of Jake's alternative strategy. Explain your tactical assessment in detail. Captain Dexhigh ordered. Jake began outlining his analysis of enemy movement patterns, identifying subtle indicators that suggested their planned attack approach. His assessment was detailed and logical, but it required making assumptions about enemy psychology and tactical thinking that went beyond standard intelligence analysis. Your proposal requires our ships to operate independently while maintaining precise timing, the captain pointed out. If coordination breaks down, we would be defeated in detail. Yes, sir, Jake acknowledged. But our ship commanders are experienced officers. If we provide them with clear objectives and timing markers, they should be able to adapt their tactics to maintain the coordination we need. Admiral Tisara realized that Jake was proposing something that challenged basic assumptions about military command and control. Traditional doctrine assumed that complex maneuvers required detailed orders and constant supervision from higher authority. Jake was suggesting that individual commanders could be trusted to make tactical decisions independently as long as they understood the overall objective. As the simulation continued and casualties mounted under conventional tactics, Captain Dexhigh made a decision that would be studied in military academies for decades. He authorized Jake's alternative strategy. The results were dramatic and immediate. The humans' analysis of enemy intentions proved to be completely accurate. When the opposing fleet launched their coordinated strike on Battle Group 7's left flank, they found the defenders ready and waiting. The carefully planned enemy attack became a devastating trap that eliminated their forward units and left their main force vulnerable to counterattack. Within 2 hours, Battle Group 7 had achieved a complete tactical victory. Not only was the convoy successfully defended, but the attacking force had been defeated so thoroughly that they were forced to withdraw from the entire star system. Admiral Tisara watched the aftermath with growing amazement. Jake Morrison's tactical innovation had required individual ship commanders to make split-second decisions based on developing situations rather than predetermined responses. Instead of following rigid formation patterns, they had adapted their movements in real time to maintain the coordination necessary for success. Most remarkably, the strategy had worked. The Altarian, Nagan, and Vorthek commanders had demonstrated abilities that Admiral Tisara had not known they possessed. Working alongside human tactical advisors, they had shown creativity and adaptability that exceeded their normal performance parameters. Similar breakthrough victories were occurring throughout the war games. Lisa Parker's engineering solutions had enabled damaged ships to continue fighting with capabilities that should have been impossible. Tony Rodriguez had coordinated planetary defense operations that transformed losing battles into strategic victories. Amy Sullivan had solved communication problems that allowed Allied forces to maintain coordination despite enemy jamming. But the most significant development was how the other species were changing. Alien officers working with human advisors were beginning to demonstrate enhanced problem-solving abilities and tactical flexibility. The humans were not just achieving their own successes. They were teaching other species to think and act in ways that improved overall performance. Admiral Tisara called for detailed analysis of all wargame results. The statistics were overwhelming. Military units with human personnel showed improvement in mission success rates across every category. More importantly, the improvements continued even when the humans were not directly involved in operations. Dr. Veltar's psychological studies had been proven correct in actual combat simulations. Humans did not just survive on their death world. They had evolved to thrive in situations where survival required constant adaptation, creative problem-solving, and the ability to function effectively when everything went wrong. The war games concluded with results that would change military doctrine across the galaxy. Forces that included human advisors had achieved victory conditions that exceeded all previous simulations. They had demonstrated tactical capabilities that were not supposed to be possible according to established military science. 6 months had passed since the first human cadets arrived at Kepler Station. The changes they had brought were spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Alliance Command had called an unprecedented interspecies military conference to discuss what they were now calling the human factor in modern warfare. General Mordak of the Vorthak Swarm Legion stood before an assembly of military leaders from every member civilization in the Alliance. His insectoid features showed none of the emotion that other species might display, but his voice carried the weight of profound discovery. "The statistics are undeniable," he said, gesturing to the massive display screens behind him. "Military units that include human personnel show improvement in mission success rates across all operational categories. More significantly, other species serving alongside humans demonstrate enhanced adaptability and problem-solving abilities that persist even when the humans are not present." Admiral Tisara nodded from her seat in the front row. Her own experience with Jake Morrison during the War Games had convinced her that something fundamental was changing in military doctrine. But General Mordak's presentation was revealing the true scope of the transformation. "My species evolved from hive-mind organisms," General Mordak continued. "Individual initiative has been virtually unknown in Vorthak culture for millions of years. Our military strength has always come from perfect coordination and collective action. Yet Vorthak soldiers working with human advisors have begun demonstrating unprecedented levels of independent tactical thinking." The assembled officers stirred with interest. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy for their disciplined swarm tactics. The idea that they could develop individual creativity was revolutionary. "Commander," Zefka rose from his seat to address the assembly. "The changes we are seeing extend beyond simple tactical improvements. Human integration is fundamentally altering how we approach military training and operational planning." He activated a holographic display showing training results from dozens of Alliance military academies. These charts show performance metrics from institutions across 17 star systems. Every academy that has implemented human training methods report significant improvements in cadet performance, particularly in scenarios involving equipment failure, communication breakdown, and unexpected tactical situations. Dr. Veltar stepped forward to present her psychological analysis. Her research had become the foundation for understanding human military capabilities, and her findings were reshaping xenopsychology across the Alliance. "The key discovery," she explained, "is that humans evolved on a world where adaptation and improvisation were not optional skills, but survival requirements. Every human grows up understanding that situations will change rapidly, that plans will need modification, and that success often requires finding solutions that are not in any manual." She displayed brain scan data comparing human and alien neural activity during stress situations. When faced with unexpected challenges, most species show increased stress responses and decreased cognitive function. Humans show the opposite pattern. Their stress levels remain stable, and their problem-solving abilities actually improve under pressure. The implications were staggering. For centuries, Alliance military doctrine had been based on the assumption that stress and uncertainty were obstacles to overcome through discipline and preparation. The humans had proven that stress and uncertainty could be advantages if approached with the right mindset. Amy Sullivan, now graduated and serving as a tactical instructor, stood before a mixed-species class of senior officers. Her lecture topic was adaptive leadership in unknown situations, a subject that had not existed in military curriculum before human integration. "The most important lesson Earth taught us," she explained to the assembled officers, "is that no plan survives contact with reality unchanged. Every mission will involve unexpected developments, equipment failures, and circumstances that require individual judgment. Lieutenant Karthok, who had once filed complaints about Amy's disregard for proper procedure, now served as her assistant instructor. His rigid adherence to protocol had evolved into something far more valuable: the ability to apply principles flexibly while maintaining operational effectiveness. The humans taught us that following orders and thinking independently are not contradictory concepts, Karthok explained to the class. Understanding the intent behind orders allows us to achieve mission objectives, even when circumstances make original plans impossible. The transformation in Karthok exemplified what was happening throughout Alliance military forces. Officers who had initially resisted human methods were discovering that adaptability and creative thinking enhanced rather than undermined military discipline. Captain Dex High, who had commanded Jake Morrison during the War Games, now headed a new tactical development program that studied human combat innovations. His report to the conference detailed how human approaches to command and control were revolutionizing space warfare. Traditional doctrine assumes that complex operations require detailed orders and constant supervision, he explained. Human methodology demonstrates that individual commanders can be trusted to make tactical decisions independently if they understand the overall mission objectives and operational principles. The results of this approach were remarkable. Fleet exercises that incorporated human tactical philosophy achieved success rates that exceeded previous records. More importantly, they maintained effectiveness even when communication systems failed or command structures were disrupted. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Kepler Station, observing the changes that had occurred since his arrival. The rigid separation between species that had once characterized the Academy was disappearing. Mixed species training units were now standard, and the collaborative approach to problem-solving had become normal rather than exceptional. He paused at an observation window overlooking one of the training bays. Inside, a group of cadets from 6 different species were working together on a tactical simulation. What struck him was not their diversity, but their unity of purpose. They were not just following human methods or alien procedures. They were creating something new that combined the best aspects of multiple approaches. Lisa Parker had become the Academy's chief engineering instructor, specializing in adaptive technology solutions. Her classes taught students how to modify equipment for unexpected uses and maintain functionality even when systems operated outside design parameters. Engineering is not just about building things that work, she explained to her students. It is about building things that continue to work when everything goes wrong. Every system should have multiple backup functions and alternative operational modes. Her approach had revolutionized Alliance technology development. New equipment designs incorporated human concepts of redundancy and adaptability, resulting in systems that were more reliable and versatile than previous generations. Tony Rodriguez commanded a mixed species unit that served as a testing ground for new tactical doctrines. His team included Altarians, Vorthic Nagans, and representatives from a dozen other species. Together, they were developing operational methods that no single species could have created alone. The strength of our unit, Tony explained to visiting officers, comes from combining different ways of thinking about the same problems. Altarian discipline, Vortha coordination, Nagan precision, and human adaptability create capabilities that exceed what any of us could achieve separately. Dr. Veltar published her final research report on human psychology and its implications for Alliance military doctrine. Her conclusions would influence military training for generations to come. The humans have taught us that survival and success in uncertain environments require more than following established procedures, she wrote. They require the ability to understand principles, apply them creatively, and adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining focus on core objectives. Her research had identified the fundamental lesson that every alien species had discovered. About Deathworld Cadets, humans did not just survive on their hostile planet by being tougher or stronger than other species. They survived by being more adaptable, more creative, and more capable of functioning effectively when everything went wrong. The conference concluded with the adoption of new Alliance military standards that incorporated human training methods across all member species. The changes were not just tactical or technical. They represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy thought about leadership, problem-solving, and survival. Commander Zefker stood once again at the observation deck where he had first watched the human transport arrive. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. The rigid hierarchies and inflexible procedures that had once defined Alliance military culture were evolving into something more dynamic and effective. Alliance fleets now deployed across the galaxy with mixed crews that combined human adaptability with alien expertise. What had begun as a simple cadet exchange program had transformed into a fundamental revolution in galactic military philosophy. The lesson about Deathworld Cadets had become universal doctrine. In an uncertain universe, the ability to adapt and overcome was not just useful but essential for survival.